Breaking news, this is your World War III update. I have some special intelligence to report from a source that is exceptionally well connected with high-ranking officials in the U.S. Department of Defense, as well as elements of U.S. Strategic Command. Now, before I go into details of disclosing that crucial information that I assure you you're not going to hear anywhere else, let's quickly go over the headlines today. Now, many of you probably have already heard that Vladimir Putin indeed has been re-elected as president of Russia. No surprise there. Throughout the course of the Russian election in the last 72 hours, Nato and its Ukrainian proxies attempted to undermine and disrupt the Russian election. Of course, they failed miserably. They flew dozens of drones deep inside of Russian territory, successfully striking numerous oil and gas facilities, likely causing the price of oil to spike. However, it did not change the outcome. In fact, like most of NATO and Ukraine's harebrained schemes as of late, it backfired miserably. Vladimir Putin secured 88% of the vote. Now, was it a legitimate election? Was it a sham election? I really don't think it matters at this point. He's now secured another 6-year tenure as president of his country, and his tone has changed on a dime. As expected, the gloves have now come off. We are going to see a different Vladimir Putin from this point forward. He went from a tone that was very diplomatic and conciliatory to one that is far more assertive and almost antagonistic in terms of some of the things that he was saying. Now openly saying that World War III is a possibility, that if NATO enters Ukraine, Russia is going to enter into a war with NATO. However, in the same breath, he said that NATO was already in Ukraine. What that means is that Russia is already at war with NATO. Now, for those of us who've been in the know for a while, we know that that is the de facto reality on the ground. But to hear him say it with so much conviction and no longer inhibited by this statement-like persona that he had to exhibit over the last few months in particular, I think we're going to see a different type of war being prosecuted from this point forward. And this is probably why people like Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, and the defense minister, Grand Chaps of the UK, have postponed their trips to Ukraine. Suddenly, not a lot of visits from EU leaders into Ukraine. Now, is this because the Ukrainian government is collapsing? Is this due with the fact that they're seeing all of these delays in resupply, in ammunition, and they're not getting the funding that they need? Possibly. One of two things is true. Either the Ukrainian government is indeed collapsing, or they finally took a page out of the art of war and are feigning weakness in an attempt to bait the Russians to doing some sort of big arrow attack that, of course, they are going to completely stop in its tracks. That's a possibility because, of course, what we're seeing very oddly is Ukraine announcing every single aspect of their plan. We're getting such and such amount of weapons on such and such a date, and we're going to be doing this offensive here at exactly this time, and it just makes no sense whatsoever. So maybe they're finally, that hubris of we're the superior military and we have NATO behind us has finally dissipated, and they're finally starting to have to think more creatively in terms of how they're engaging the Russians. I guess we'll see. Time will tell. Now, other headlines are as follows. NATO is running nuclear drills on Russia's border. NATO is currently LARPing with CBRN gear and full hazmat suits along Russia's border. What could possibly go wrong in that situation? Again, drone strikes across Russia paired with attacks across the border in the Belgorod region. Russia is going to be drafting another 300,000 soldiers. Elon Musk, we got to talk about his terrifying spy satellite network. Europe might be bringing back conscription in many countries as it prepares its schools and its education system for war. Israel has begun a new phase of the war. I believe what's happening there, they are starting this attack on this hospital, and I think this is some surreptitious attempt to segue into an attack on Rafah in a way that is not going to necessarily receive as much backlash from the international community. Of course, you have even the United States now calling for a ceasefire in the UN, which we've never seen before. So this might prompt Netanyahu to do something very abrupt in an attempt to interdict this attempt to stop the Israelis from what's about to happen. And that, of course, is going to grow into a much broader conflict throughout the region. We have the biggest NATO base being built or planned to be built in Romania. We have a war on Transnistria beginning, it would appear, as a drone strike on a helicopter took place today. We have catastrophic financial data to discuss, specifically in Canada, but it's something that's likely we're seeing all across Western countries. North Korea launched 3 missiles towards the Sea of Japan. They also unveiled a massive greenhouse project, which may well be a front for something else. And even in Africa, World War III is spreading as Niger kicks out the French. In addition to that, there's been fallout with the US because, of course, Niger supplies uranium to various countries. So if they don't have control of Niger, then you're going to have countries like Iran able to get uranium from said countries. So that could be very problematic for the strategic calculus of the Allies. Now, let's talk about this information I received from my source. So, this source is somebody who I've interviewed on the channel before. This is open source intelligence, but it's one of those things that nobody is ever going to go and research and look at. And you have to really be in the industry to notice these things. So this is what's going on. About a week and a half ago, the Department of Defense moved up the delivery date on a purchase order scheduled for May. They changed the delivery date to no later than April 30th, 2024. They asked if we could do it, implying that it was voluntary. And they didn't give me any reason why. Even though I asked a couple times, my purchasing contact said that he didn't know, but maybe they changed the schedule of a ship leaving port or something like that. This is the wholesale freeze-dried food company, okay? They make the highest quality freeze-dried food on the market. The only ones that compare are maybe like a Nutri-Store and a Mountain House, but these guys are like the top tier. This is what the admirals on the nuclear submarines consume. Okay, and we're going to get to that. Then I got a call a little while ago on a Sunday morning, mind you, which I don't think has ever happened in more than 20 years of working with the Navy. And they pushed a delivery date up on another mid-rat purchase that was scheduled for a June delivery. Mid-rats are basically what they call midnight rations. Okay, it's basically the food that is served at or around midnight for the shift either coming onto or being relieved from watch. So this is for, like the 24-hour missions, I guess you could say. The new date was April 30th, once again. So these are 2 separate orders, both needing to be completed by April 30th. And this is not a end of fiscal year issue, I don't think, because like most purchase orders, you can actually pay for it before the date and then you can chalk it up to that fiscal year. This is actually, you have to deliver it by this day. This time I asked with a little more firmly as to why the change, as they didn't ask if we could do it this time, they just changed the publish date. In other words, this one was not voluntary. If we can't meet the new delivery date, we are to inform them in writing no later than March 19th. In such case, we could consider the PO to be canceled. Instead of getting the answer, I don't know why, or something like that, I got the answer, I'm not at liberty of discussing that with you. Now, guys, I can tell you this. I've had this experience before with food companies. In fact, some of you probably remember the MRE fiasco, okay, that's preceded the Ukraine war. When the military says they need something by a certain date, usually that means that they're planning, that they know something big is about to go down. Okay, that some massive war is about to start. There's a reason why they give those deadlines. Okay, and these are the breadcrumbs that you really have to look for as leading indicators, because it's the only real open source intelligence leading in. I mean, there's a few other things, but you have to look at the supply chain. Because if you look at the situation in Israel right now, I think this is probably more geared towards U.S. Strategic Command for reasons I'm going to get into. But if Israel gets into a big war, a friend of mine was telling me that, and this is something we've talked about on the channel before, part of the reason why Lebanon doesn't want to enter the conflict, although some people say that they have a greater tolerance for their supply chain than do the Israelis, who are wholly dependent on outside sources for food. So if the ports get closed because Lebanon starts, lobbing missiles at them, or if the Houthis keep firing these ballistic missiles at Israeli ports, and now you have a lot of ships that are not going to port. You, of course, have all these ships that have to go all the way around. So Israel's economy is struggling. Could this food be because the U.S. government knows that Israel is about to be pulled into a massive conflict that is going to spread to Lebanon and likely into Syria and likely into Iraq and possibly even into Iran? It is very possible that that is what's happening. However, the food that is being ordered here seems to be food that is oriented more towards nuclear submarines, okay? Again, just rereading that last part, I got the answer that I'm not at liberty of discussing this with you. Now, mind you, this is an admiral who told him this, somebody he's known with for a long time. I'm not going to get into the details of the personal information. I do have liberty to disclose this information just so people know, because again, it is open source intelligence. We don't go to ball games every weekend or anything like that, but we are very, close acquaintances. I spent the last couple hours reaching out to everyone and anyone I know, trying to see if I can figure out what the rush is, why the date of April 30th. And as you can imagine, this is going to be hard for us because, of course, now, they're being bombarded by orders. They have their standard POs, their contracts with the military that they have to deliver, but this is going to complement things. So why the rush? He says, feel free to share this information as the contract and dates have been updated and are publicly available for anyone who has access, so I'm not sharing any state secrets here. Let me just see if there's anything else here that I can disclose. I've been thinking about this. The only thing I can think of from his perspective is that maybe they're putting more subs out to sea sooner, more submarines, okay? But I'm not even sure this is something that they can do. It looks like our stuff goes to both missile subs and attack subs, so I can't even tell if it's defensive or offensive in nature. Now, of course, the telltale sign that this would be going to either Gaza refugees or the Israelis, for that matter, would be that they would be halal or kosher foods, and he did not disclose whether or not they were halal or kosher foods. I'm glad I got that out of the way because it looks like my camera is going to overheat again. Thank you very much, global warming. Got a lot of flack on that video that we just did with our friend Leon Simons. Guys, the science speaks for itself. Whether or not you want to believe it, it's kind of like, if you're given a diagnosis, you can argue the diagnosis or you can argue the medicine. I would say argue the medicine. Argue with the WEF. Argue with the Klaus Schwabs and all the people who want to bring in this austerity measures in order to deal with the problem. But the fact of the matter is, the science is just there. It's so blatantly obvious, okay, that it's indisputable. It's irrefutable. And I would encourage you to go check that out because he brings a very unique perspective. I mean, we are giving you guys guests who, in a few months' time, this is going to be the prevailing view on various media channels that weren't even talking about this stuff, okay? And it's not a run-of-the-mill view. I would encourage you to go and check out that video and watch it all the way through. This is stuff that Guy McPherson, a guest that we've had on the channel before, was talking about 5 years ago. Everybody laughed him out of the room, and now there is scientific data to back it up. And that means that, you should probably prepare for shit to get very wild. In fact, we had a prepping family message us recently who had their home burned down in Texas as a result of the fire there. The very unexpected fire activity, the biggest fire in Texas history. So I'm still trying to brainstorm what we can do for them in an attempt to just rally support, because we got to stick together as a community. But I tell you, man, it's going to touch everybody very soon. So please give that video a little bit of time and understand that we're not making any prescriptions. We're just telling you like it is. I don't get ahead by making those videos. In fact, it's always a step back. I always lose subs. But would you rather me just tell you what you want to hear, or would you rather me, knowing what you know about me, walking along this journey with me over the years, would you rather me be honest with you about what I truly think and not believe because you don't believe data? Data just speaks for itself, and that's what's happening. So, you know, you can agree with it if you want. If you don't, do so to your own peril. Elon Musk's spy satellite network, okay? SpaceX reportedly signed a $1.8 billion contract with U.S. intelligence services back in 2021. We talked about this before. Now, get a load of this. What can this thing do? Okay, this is constant surveillance. This is terrifying. Elon Musk's secretive Starshield project, you know, the guy everybody loves, the free speech advocate, he's just a poster boy, guys. Trust me. Everything that Tesla and Elon Musk is bringing into the world will be the most draconian technology the world has ever seen. And they need a guy like that to deliver it. I know that probably means I'll never get Elon on the channel or do an interview. At this point, it doesn't matter. We don't even have that much time. Okay, so the vast constellation of low Earth orbit satellites will be able to track targets on the ground in real time nearly anywhere worldwide, the sources claim. In real time, anywhere worldwide. How do you hide from that? One of them boasted that Starshield would ensure no one can hide from the US government. The system also reportedly aims to be more resilient to attacks by rival space powers. That shit is crazy, man. Okay, before my camera freezes up here, this is a drone strike. This is a document talking about 300,000 troops that are going to be drafted. This is, okay, so the NATO is doing nuclear drills in the Arctic right now. Let me see if I can find my notes for that. I'll just show you some pictures here. So this is from everybody's favorite, the Daily Mail. These guys look cool. They don't quite look as cool as me when I LARP around in my hazmat gear. Looks like they got some cozy suits, but no disrespect, this is hard-ass training. To have to wear a mask in those kind of conditions, hopefully, you know, these suits, these hazmat suits are typically quite warm, but it just makes for, it's an uncomfortable experience. And you know, it's tough training, I would imagine, especially having to carry around all the gear and stay out there for hours on end. But this is what's happening along Russia's border right now in the Arctic Circle. So they're going to have it coming one of these days, not very long from now. Shit's going to hit the fan. Drone strikes in Transnistria. So there was a helicopter which was attacked. It was a helicopter that hadn't been used in a couple of years. This is the first time in a long time that we've seen an attack in Transnistria. Typically, these attacks are like fire bombings or actual detonations of bombs. But to see a drone means that this probably came from Ukraine. This could be just a shot across the bow because, of course, it was a defunct helicopter that nobody used for 2 years, so they say. But either way, it's a sign of escalation, no doubt. Let's see what else we got here. Vladimir Putin warns of full-scale World War III if Western troops enter Ukraine. Well, what else is new? But again, the rhetoric and the tone in which Vladimir Putin has been saying these things has been increasing in intensity and frequency. So it's certainly a point of concern. My camera may shut off at any moment now. I'm sorry, you would think that I would have all this stuff prepared for. I got to get a cooling fan on this thing. You know, for a $4,000 frickin' camera, you think the thing wouldn't overheat, but that's just the world we're living in nowadays. Now, Russia, Vladimir Putin also said that NATO already has boots on the ground in Ukraine. So he's saying that if NATO's in Ukraine, then it's World War III, but they already have boots on the ground. Again, it's all just contradictory language. German minister says that we should prepare for our students for a possible war. Okay. Europe's dependent on Russian gas. So what's going to happen at the end of this year with Ukraine is they're going to be suspending their relations with the Russian Gazprom. Okay, so right now, believe it or not, Russian gas is still transiting Ukraine to go into Europe. Ukraine hasn't messed with these pipelines because, of course, Their lifeline is Europe, who currently needs that gas. However, the projections are that they're not going to need the gas. So that's going to be the last financial incentive to prevent the full-blown escalation of the war with Ukraine. And if Ukraine was smart, they would think about it. Okay, right now the EU is using us because they need Russian gas while they get their other systems online. And once that relationship is severed, then we're not going to have that inroad with the Russians, and we're not going to have the Europeans are no longer going to be dependent on us. They're promising us 100 billion euros a year, but are we going to get it past next year if we are destroyed? Something they should probably be thinking about. Romania is building one of the biggest NATO bases, even bigger than Ramstein. And it's going to be home to, I believe, 10,000 troops. I don't know if that's bigger than Ramstein. I thought there was 50,000 U.S. troops in Germany. I guess they're not all at Ramstein. But anyways, they're in the process of building this. Are they even going to be able to build it is the question. The way that these things are going, probably not. But it will be a convenient excuse to get far more military equipment and NATO troops in there. Now, right now, Canadian bankruptcy business filings are through the roof. They are higher than in 2008 at this point in time. So you can see right there, and of course I'm standing in the way, the highest point in time was in the early 90s, but it looks like we're rapidly heading up in that direction. And I would say there's probably fewer small businesses nowadays because, of course, the oligopolical takeover of the planet has, of course, caused a lot of the wealth to be concentrated in the hands of an oligopoly of companies over the past 20 years. In particular, SpaceX is building this new crazy network. I still think that the entirety of lots of the stuff that Elon Musk is working on, including X, somebody had said, I think it was Lord Bebo, he said that, they're going to try to ban X after TikTok. For starters, I don't think they're really going to ban TikTok. They're just going to try to take control of it. And as I've talked about, another unpopular opinion, I don't care because I say what I feel when I want to. I've marched to the beat of my own drum. It is what it is, sometimes to my own detriment. But no, they're not going to ban X. They're not going to ban TikTok. Why would they ban the thing where we thought broadcast on 24/7? There's that old saying, you don't want to burn an enemy's bridge because you might need to cross it someday. And the same is true with a lot of these social media platforms. They want us on there talking so they can single us out and know who we are. Okay, so why would you give that up? So no, they're not going to ban X. There's nothing revolutionary or rebellious about X. I'm sorry to tell people, but it's not fundamentally going against the status quo or the establishment. You might believe it is, but it isn't. That's just what they want you to think. EU state urges the UK to introduce conscription. So the Latvians are freaking out. They're saying, hey, you guys got to bring back mandatory military service to deter Russia because, of course, they are going to be first on the chopping block. This map shows you all of the, well, just shows you a bunch of different wingdings. But basically, you know, NATO is right now completely surrounding the Russians. So it's only a matter of time before shots are fired and the Iron Curtain comes down. Niger is termination of U.S. military ties followed the accusation of Iran uranium deal. Senior U.S. officials raised alarm with the junta over deal that would give Iran access to Nigerian uranium. So we're starting to see, you know, all of these adversarial countries start to unify with one another, from Niger to Iran to North Korea. They're all starting to work hand in glove. South Korea is quietly ordering 90 more Taurus bunker-busting missiles for North Korea. Unfortunately, North Korea is probably dug so deep, I mean so deep, that you think 90 Taurus missiles bunker-busting, maybe they can go through like a few floors at best. These aren't going to do anything. I think I made the analogy of it would be like trying to give somebody a heart attack by scratching their chest. I think the North Koreans, with nothing better to do with their time, being so isolated from the rest of the world, they've probably dug hundreds of meters into the earth in some places, and they definitely have the technology to do it. What else should we talk about? Again, the market's still wildly overvalued, in the top 1% of overvaluations of all time. The only other times where it was higher was the dot-com bubble and the peak of the mania in 2021. So the bubble's definitely going to burst. That's why I've made some very big moves lately, and I assure you that the channel is going to take a new turn soon. We're still going to do all this stuff, but we're going to be doing the homestead thing too, because this is the time to do it. We're running out of time to lock that in, so we went and did it. We finally went and did it, and I will disclose the details of this at a later date. But thanks for watching, guys. That's all I'm going to talk about today, because my camera is totally going to overheat right away. I will see you later today with another update, and if you want to get yourself some freeze-dried food, I would recommend wholesale freeze-dry. First off, if you can't afford any of that stuff, don't succumb to these cheap buckets of, how can I say, things that play on your patriotism, okay? These buckets, if they look really good, you got to look at the ingredients, you got to look at the calories. A lot of them will have impression meat, so it's not real meat, and they play on people's insecurities. The only brands of freeze-dried food I would recommend are Freeze-Dried Wholesale, Mountain House, Happy Yak, Backpacker's Pantry, Peak Refuel, NutriStore, maybe a couple others, but you don't even really need that. All you need is rice and beans. Stuff like this is great to supplement your pantry, and you can even get your own freeze dryer if you're somebody who is really committed to the task of preparedness, and maybe you have a community to feed. You can even pitch together with your community, get a freeze dryer and put it in a place where everybody can use it, because of course one person, sometimes it's too much for just one person. We have small, medium, large, and we even have an extra large one, which just produces massive amounts of food and is very efficient. Done plenty of videos on that. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. I'll talk to you in a little bit.